Thank you so much for spending the next 30 minutes with us. The objective of today's webinar is to discuss how investing in a product like Quirius, where it innovates at the heart of legal practice, the attorney-client conversation, can have a profound impact on the future of legal practice. So today we're going to cover a lot, but really our key objectives are that you come away from this webinar with an appreciation of why it's important to think about innovation in the attorney-client conversation. We will also provide a framework on how to assess the risks, the benefits, the alternatives of adopting AI in your practice. So whether it's Quirius or another tool, we'll provide a framework that you can use. And we also want to provide a demo and an understanding of how Quirius can be adopted responsibly in the conversation like no other tool that's on the market. So let's get started. I'll start with quick intros here. So I'm Hillary Bowman. I'm the founder and CEO of Quirius. We are a novel legal tech tool that enhances attorney-client conversations with generative AI. I practiced law for over 12 years as a healthcare regulatory attorney and founded Quirius to leverage technology. I really felt like there was a gap in the tools that were available on the market to really navigate the challenging attorney-client conversations that I was encountering. We are so lucky to be joined by Philip Omorogbe. He is Senior Corporate Counsel with deep expertise in tech transactions, AI strategy, and venture capital financing. You serve as trusted counsel to Fortune 500 companies, emerging growth ventures, and institutional investors. You're a former attorney of some very big law firms, and you've led over 200 million in equity financings and advised on multi-billion-dollar M&A transactions. You are also recognized as a thought leader in AI regulation, which is how we became connected recently. And I understand that you've also given presentations to bar associations and even trainings for the government on responsible adoption of AI. So we are really grateful to have you as part of this conversation, and I think you are going to kick it off.
Thank you so much, Hillary. What a wonderful introduction. I'm very, very thankful for that. And I'm really, really excited to speak with you all just about all the different tools, AI tools that are available for attorneys now and the wider legal tech landscape. So what I'm seeing from a lot of clients actually is they're asking, okay, this is some of my clients in-house. Some of my clients in startups and other companies are asking for what kind of tools that they can actually bring in-house. And I think this is a great overview of the different tools that are available and generally the legal tech landscape. So I love the way this is separated out. So first of all, let's talk about the client engagement intake, which really is the heart of the relationship that we as attorneys form with our clients. And I think when it comes to virtual meeting and collaboration enhancement tools, Quirius definitely is one that makes sense just from the very beginning, just having something that's able to not only just organize your thoughts, but also give you probing questions and allow you to frame that initial conversation with your clients. Now, another huge area is with legal analysis and drafting. We have legal research tools that are enhanced by artificial intelligence. So we have Lexis and we have Westlaw, that have their co-counsel. I think Westlaw has co-counsel, which is an AI addition to. It's all what we're already traditionally accustomed to. We have some document automation in the form of Spellbook, e-discovery tools like Everlaw, case and analytics like Lex Machina. Of course, we have other large tools like Harvey AI, which is almost like a general purpose, legal assistant for a lot of lawyers. And finally, when it comes to client matter management, resolution, sort of like legal administration and practice management software, Clio and Smokeball are examples. When it comes to billing and timekeeper, Intap is a good one. Clio is also very helpful with that. And finally, for client relationship management, HubSpot, which is useful not just in the legal landscape, but overarchingly. So that just gives you a sense of just how quickly this landscape is evolving and just how many tools are available now for us in terms of artificial intelligence.
Thank
I'll
you.
pass it back to you, Hillary.
Yeah, thank you. So I will dive into the conversation part of this. So, as you have developed through your career, I think back to the tools that I was using when I was practicing in a law firm. I was making decisions whether or not I realized it about what tools to use, how to use them, when to use them. I'm thinking of those, the billing apps, the legal research tools that you just mentioned. And those were all very important tools, but I think something that's been overlooked for years is actually the client conversation. And I recognize that off the bat, that is not a technology, but Curious is sort of making it a technology. And so on our team, we actually think the most important tool and possibly the most underutilized recently has been, investing in the client conversation. And I know this, as I mentioned, from personal experience, going back, whether I was at a law firm or as in-house counsel, those conversations with your clients, it's where you earn their trust. It's where you win their business. And these are important conversations where you have to issue spot. You have to ask great questions. You have to connect with your client. Phil, you mentioned earlier about building the relationship, right? That's where, these conversations are where you're building the relationship. And these conversations, they are important, but they're also really complex, right? The laws are constantly changing. Client expectations are getting higher year after year. And so we really need something to help us. Not to mention, we are also spending a tremendous amount of our working hours in these attorney-client conversations. So up here on the slide, I have, in talking with attorney users, they've said, I'm spending almost 5 hours a day sometimes in virtual meetings, depending on practice area. We've seen attorneys spending, more than half of their day in attorney-client conversations. What does that mean over the course of the year? Well, a 10-person law firm could be spending 12,500 hours in virtual meetings. And really, until Quarius, there has not been a tech tool that enhances, that supports the attorney in these really important moments that make up such a huge portion of their day. And so seeing that gap, I felt, along with my team, that there had to be a better way to have attorney-client conversations. And so we've reimagined them with our tool. So just to give everyone a sense, if you're not familiar of how the product works, I'm going to quickly walk through a demo here. So at its core, Quarius is a tool that maximizes the advice that you are providing to your client in the conversation, as well as minimizes the administrative work after your conversation happens. So Quarius joins your virtual meeting as a bot. So you'll see it here. I did a hypothetical conversation with Bob Ambrogi, who has reviewed thousands of legal tech tools over the years, and he had a scenario that I'll talk about in a second, but that bot joins your virtual meeting and it's transparent to everyone. The attorney sees the sidebar on the right-hand side of the screen with potential issues. So this was a scenario where Bob said, I'm thinking of starting a charter fishing business. I am going to buy a boat from Canada and hire an unpaid intern. And so just based on those facts, without any additional mention of legal issues, Quarius was able to flag the import issue and the labor and employment issue. The value of that obviously is, helping deliver great client services. Once you've flagged an issue, you can also summarize the research associated with any of those issues. So if you click on the research functionality, you'll see there's actually specifics about, how one might import a boat, what the requirements would be, what fees you would have to pay, things like that. That just makes the conversation more important. And then the last bit of functionality that I'll highlight during the meeting is the question prompts. So as you mentioned earlier, having prompts about key questions that you can ask your client in the moment just helps uncover the critical details. Here, the questions were about, how far along is Bob in purchasing the boat, and what responsibilities do you plan to give your unpaid intern? So all of these are things that happen during the attorney-client conversation, and just, make the most of that moment with your client. After the conversation, we also support the post-meeting workflow. So we try to reduce the admin work, including through a summary email like this. So this summary email can be sent to colleagues and say, hey, I need help with one of those issues, or you can send that email to a client. The attorney also has access to a detailed set of notes at the end of the conversation. This includes a high-level summary, more detailed insights or notes, as well as potential legal issues and administrative tasks. And all of these can be edited. So while this is generated for you automatically, you can make it your own after the conversation. You can also export this to a document management system. And the last thing I'll highlight that firm attorneys really enjoy is that there is an auto-drafted billing narrative. So because we're in the conversation, we can suggest what the narrative can be for your billing entry. And then lastly, after the conversation, Queries will just follow you into your next meeting. So we integrate with Google, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams, and the bot will auto join once it's synced with your calendar unless you toggle it off. So I'll pause there and oops. Next, I'll hand it back to Phil. So when you are evaluating legal tech tools, I think, Phil, you've put a lot of thought into, how to go about it, what questions to ask. You've advised clients on doing that. And so I thought we could use Queries as a case study for kind of that thought process.
No, yeah, no, I think that's great. And these are exactly the kind of things that I would be asking clients and be telling clients to think about as they're thinking about, which vendor to select and how they do it. So the first thing here is just the vendor expertise, right? Like I think a lot of the times, particularly in artificial intelligence, there's just an explosion of products. So you want to make sure that the product is actually being built by attorneys, folks who've practiced before, folks who actually understand, and also being actively advised by attorneys as well. And you want to see what kind of endorsements that it has too, right? Like you want a tool that not only can work on the engineering side, but also is integrated into the kind of work that we do as attorneys here. Then the next is about that engineering piece, the product architecture piece, right? So you want to make sure, with our work, the most important thing is just confidentiality as well as security. And so when you're thinking about that product architecture, you want to ask questions as to the security that is used here, whether, and maybe I should be asking you, Hillary, and then you can kind of give an answer to how Curious handles these questions.
Yeah. So in particular, and it's summarized here, one of the key features of our security is that we privately deploy large language models that are used to process the conversation. So we are not using a public API where parts of your conversation are exposed. Like all of that stays within our secure cloud environment. And so that's really notable. Other features that we have in the security is, we use end-to-end encryption. We remove personal information from audio to transcribed text. So even, when information from the conversation touches a large language model, the personal information's already been removed. And then the last thing I'll highlight is just at the end of a conversation, any partial audio or transcription files are immediately deleted. So it just reduces the risk that your data is out there available and, at risk to being disclosed. Like we eliminate that by just discarding those files.
And that's great. Like those are the kind of things that, when I'm advising clients on what they want to integrate in-house, is just how is the data going to be treated? How is that going to be used? And another thing too, and I'd like to ask Hillary this question just so that we can complete this, case study in Curious, is just about the terms and conditions. So what data are you going to keep? What data are you going to own? How much access are they going to have to your existing database? These are questions that I would ask the vendor. So I guess for you, Hillary, what are some of the key terms and conditions for Curious around this?
Yes. So we are very transparent in our information security exhibit. We are, we say we don't use your data to train our models. Our models are not self-learning. We don't retain your data past 60 days. So we keep it for that period of time because we've found attorney users want it just as a backup in case they, don't get a chance to pull it down, like those summaries that I mentioned. If they don't export those to their document management system right away, we do give a little bit of a grace period. But after that, we truly do not retain your data. We have a code that runs on a daily basis where any data that's outside of that retention period is deleted. And that's by design. Again, I built this product knowing from the very beginning that attorneys and clients would be using this tool. And so I wanted to get the benefits of generative AI into the hands of attorneys without the risks.
And another thing too to consider as part of this vendor selection framework, and these two go hand in hand. This is around, ethical implications of adoption. So we're thinking about how can we use this responsibly, and also about the privacy and security standards here. You spoke about the privacy security standards with the product architecture,
Right.
but let's first talk about the ethical implications of the adoption here in terms of curious.
Yeah, so why don't I'll skip to the next slide and it sort of summarizes all of these and then we'll
Got
go
it.
back and finish the framework. Yeah, so I think this is a good segue. So I've done actually a handful of presentations now to state bar associations and other legal organizations. And this is pretty much what you see in the upper left-hand corner here are the laws, or yes, I would say they are the rules that are implicated by using this tool. And whether you're in Alabama or New York, these numbers, the rules pretty much map to the state laws that would apply in order to maintain your license. So the first is competence. So you just have to understand the tools that you're using in representing your clients. And that's, the due diligence we were just talking about. That's how you would satisfy that. Communication is the transparency, just being transparent to your client that you're using technology. And then you can kind of imagine, the responsibilities that apply for those other rules, notably, obviously, keeping confidential information, ensuring that any technology that you're using is maintaining confidentiality. I will quickly highlight while we're on this slide. So beyond the ethical obligations that we have in order to have a license, we also should be aware of attorney-client privilege, right? That's the evidentiary standard that says, communications between attorney and clients are protected and not admissible in litigation unless it's waived. And so a question that has come up before when we adopted email and cloud storage and virtual meetings is that technology that waives privilege? And if so, and if not, why isn't it? And so in the past, we've concluded that technology is not a third party that waives privilege if there are reasonable privacy and security safeguards in place. And so I've mentioned some of those previously, but wanted to just address that. A few other things to be aware of if you're in a two-party consent state for wiretapping laws, you have to be extra careful about using any technology that not only records but intercepts the audio of your conversation. And then also good to be aware that there are court orders that have been issued recently that require certain large language models to retain the logs of searches or prompts. So that can also affect tools that you're using. And then the last thing I'll just highlight here is malpractice insurance has put out some guidance about just general note takers and recordings of full transcriptions of client conversations and discouraging the use of that by attorneys. Okay, so I'll flip back to the framework. So we kind of did cover the privacy and security bit.
We did. And then just the last part of the framework would just be the industry reputation here and just kind of how well regarded is this particular tool. You don't want to use a tool that, that folks are not saying good things about it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I started to touch on this. So general purpose note takers, I've definitely heard of attorneys that are using it and capturing their conversations. As I mentioned, there have been some warnings recently from malpractice insurance carriers about the risks of that. If you do decide to use it, obviously the consent from your client is extremely important. However, the functionality, these don't provide the real-time meeting insights that I was talking about earlier with Queries. You also have to be very careful about the privacy and security considerations. I have definitely seen in the fine print of these tools where it says, we are using your data to train our model. And so you should just be aware of that. Although they are very, these note takers, I can see the reasons for attorneys using them. They're multi-platform. They generally tend to be very inexpensive, but in my experience, just not designed well for our use case as attorneys, where we are responsible for safeguarding sensitive client information, for maintaining that trust. And so, I think this was an opportunity for a product like Queris to fill that gap. The other thing I'll mention too is that oftentimes when I do talk about our product, I hear, oh, we're experimenting with Copilot, which is an AI platform assistant on Microsoft. And these platform tools, they do have a lot of functionality. They can access lots of data. They are not multi-platform though. They are just built for, either the Microsoft or Google ecosystem. And they also require prompting, right? They require the attorney to do something proactive in order to get results. And it has been in my experience that no attorney ever says, I love being a prompt engineer. It's actually quite the opposite. People say, oh, I don't want to learn, similar to Lexis and Westlaw searches, like I don't want to learn how to write prompts. That's not really something I want to do. So we've taken that into account with the Queris design, and that you can just work as you normally would and, go about your normal workflow, and we've done the prompting behind the scenes. And then the last thing I'll cover, I wanted to leave a few minutes to address any questions, is the return on investment. So Queris is priced in such a way that if you are using our tool and you are benefiting, say, from reducing the admin work of drafting billing entries, we've calculated that at an average billing rate of about $350 an hour, if you can save 5 minutes from each of those hours because you're not spending time drafting billing entries, putting them in a billing entry system, and you can convert that small amount of time into billable work, you really only have to find like 0.3 hours a month to cover the cost of a subscription to Queris. So it is priced in such a way that you can achieve a return on an investment in a very short period of time. So I'll just wrap up the presentation by saying, I saw, I shared the demo earlier with Bob Ambrogi, and he flagged that this is just a really practical tool. We are unique in that we are focused on the attorney-client conversation, and we have taken a very practical approach to addressing the pain points that attorneys have when they are talking to clients. One, keeping up with the changing legal landscape, and then also addressing whatever it is that clients throw your way, right? In a conversation, they can really, go off in unexpected ways. And the second is the administrative work that comes out of an attorney-client conversation. I think that can be also really challenging, having to keep track of notes in really complex, transactions or litigation. And we can provide the benefits of that post-meeting summarization without some of the risks that were previously highlighted. So if you do want to try it for free, you can actually go to our landing page. You can click Get Started for free, and we will give you 10 virtual meetings for free to try Queris in your meetings. And of course, we always love to hear from our attorney users. That feedback is taken very seriously, and it is incorporated into our product roadmap. So I will just, Phil, is there anything, as we come to the end of the webinar, is there any other thoughts or kind of messages you want to emphasize as folks are assessing their options in generative AI?
Yeah, no, I think one thing that comes to mind is, a lot of people are afraid of, generative AI replacing lawyers. And that quote that everybody says is, AI is not going to replace you, but it's lawyers using AI that's going to replace you. And there was a study actually done by Stanford just looking at how people are using AI, and they're finding the AI that works best is not the ones that replace folks, but the ones that work hand in hand in concert, like a teammate with people. And I think that that's what you need to be thinking about when you're deciding which AI tool to bring in, because at this point, it's a yes, right? Like we're going to bring some generative AI tools in. So it's which one is going to be that hand holder, which one is going to be that teammate that's going to work with me. And I think I'd ask you, Hillary, how is Curious that hand holder, that teammate for people as you're thinking of Gen AI?
Yeah, I love that quote, by the way, or that concept. So I think Chris is a perfect teammate in your conversation. And, for the obvious reasons, like it is just another set of eyes, another set of ears that's flagging potential issues that are coming up in conversation, right? We take these conversations in imperfect circumstances. We might be tired, distracted, already thinking about our next meeting. And so, while we are very capable and, able to be detailed oriented, these conversations can go in unexpected directions and we don't always, have perfect circumstances. So I think for that reason, Chris can be a really great teammate in that conversation, whether it's identifying potential legal issues or asking, suggesting questions that can just eliminate, bothersome follow-up. It offers a lot of support for sure. All right. So just to wrap up, yeah, I think the goal here is that we want you to think about imagining a future where you're going into virtual meetings. You're not just spending time with your client, but you're really investing in it. You're uncovering potential legal issues. You're delivering higher quality legal services in a way that just makes those clients more loyal and you keep strengthening that relationship. So I think today we've shown that Chris has a vision for how the future of law can look, and specifically the future of attorney-client conversations by leveraging generative AI. So thank you so much for joining us. We will just take, there were two questions. So the first question I wanted to address is, Phil, if you were asked by a client, say in-house counsel, and their business client, right, their internal business team was nervous about having an AI tool in the conversation, how would you advise them, or, what could they say to their business client to, work through that and possibly adopt a tool?
Yeah. So the first thing that I think a lot of business clients would be afraid of is that confidentiality piece that you talked about, Hillary. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that, one thing that the in-house counsel can say to assure is, okay, just, stating the law on this, which is to say that by having technology in these meetings, it doesn't mean that we're waiving this privilege. Instead, if there is a reasonable expectation of privacy based on this technology, if there are, high security standards with this technology, then there's an expectation that we obviously did not waive that confidentiality. So with that, first of all, assuring the business stakeholders that this is going to be confidential, that's the first thing. Then the second thing is not just that it's confidential, but that it's actually removed, deleted, right? So they want to understand that there is that freedom to speak during the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to understand, okay, what is going to be the value for having it in here? And then secondly, can I still have that open space to have conversations? And I think just using Curious as a case study now, high
Yep.
security, yes, we're going to maintain that privilege. And secondly, the fact that these conversations are deleted, that is also very great. So
Mm-hmm.
we get all the benefits and we've minimized all the risks so that we can actually use this to continue to grow forward.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I'm sure your clients really appreciate that guidance in a really exciting time, but lots of change happening. So thank you so much for spending the 30 minutes with us, and
Of course.
we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.